The massive space station hung in the void like a glittering city, its countless lights reflecting off the hulls of alien ships from across the galaxy. Inside the main council chamber, hundreds of different alien species had gathered for what they considered routine business. The air buzzed with the constant hum of universal translators working overtime, converting dozens of languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Velkai stood nearly 8 feet tall, his blue-scaled skin catching the artificial light as he shuffled through digital files. His species, the hegemony, had controlled this part of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They were used to being in charge, used to smaller species begging for their protection and guidance. Today was supposed to be just another day of reviewing applications from primitive worlds seeking membership in their grand alliance. "Another backwater planet wants to join us," Velkai announced to his colleague, Commander Nixtar. The aquatic alien floated in a specialized suit filled with the murky water his species needed to survive. His tentacles danced across holographic displays, pulling up Earth's application files. "Earth, they call it," Nixtar gurgled through his translator. "Third planet from a yellow star. Standard oxygen atmosphere, mostly water. Looks like a typical garden world to me." The two aliens had seen thousands of these applications over the centuries. Most came from species that had barely figured out space travel, desperate for the advanced technology and protection that hegemony membership provided. These primitive civilizations usually had nothing to offer except raw materials and cheap labor. But as they read through Earth's defensive assessment, something caught their attention. Velkai's large eyes widened as he read the section about planetary hazards. The humans had listed dozens of creatures they claimed were extremely dangerous. They wrote about animals that could kill with a single bite, others that were nearly impossible to detect until it was too late, and some that were so aggressive they would attack anything that moved. "Listen to this nonsense," Velkai said, his voice carrying easily across the chamber. Other alien representatives began to gather around, curious about what had caught his attention. "These humans claim their world is full of deadly predators. They say some of their animals can kill a grown human in minutes." The laughter started slowly but quickly spread throughout the chamber. Species after species added their own amused comments. The bat-like Zarians, who came from a world with no large animals at all, chittered with what passed for laughter among their kind. The rock-dwelling granite folk made grinding sounds that indicated humor. Even the usually serious crystalline collective flickered with colors that meant they found something funny. "On my homeworld," announced one representative, "the largest predator is about the size of what humans call a house cat. It eats small insects and runs away if you look at it wrong." "Same here," agreed another. "We eliminated all dangerous wildlife 50,000 years ago. Why would any civilized species allow such creatures to exist?" Commander Nixtar pulled up more files, his tentacles moving faster as he found more examples of what humans considered threatening wildlife. "They have creatures called sharks that can grow over 20 feet long. Fish. They're afraid of fish." The laughter grew louder. The assembled aliens came from worlds that had been carefully managed for thousands of generations. Their ancestors had long ago eliminated any species that posed even the slightest threat to civilization. The idea that an intelligent species would share their planet with dangerous animals seemed absurd. "And look at this," Velkai continued. "They have flying creatures that can inject venom, crawling things that hide in dark places, and something called a crocodile that they describe as a living fossil. They actually seem proud that these monsters have survived on their world for millions of years." An elderly representative from the core worlds, whose species had been part of the hegemony since its founding, shook his head in disbelief. "In all my years, I've never seen such obvious exaggeration. These humans are clearly trying to make their primitive world sound more dangerous than it actually is. They probably think it will make them seem more impressive to us." "Exactly," Velkai agreed. "They want us to believe they're tough survivors who've faced incredible dangers. It's a pathetic attempt to negotiate from a position of strength." The Council's decision was swift and unanimous. Earth would be classified as a Category 1 nursery world, the lowest possible threat rating. It was the classification reserved for planets with docile wildlife, primitive inhabitants, and no real defensive capabilities. Worlds that could be easily controlled and managed by more advanced civilizations. We'll send Scout Fleet Gamma for a standard compliance inspection, Nixitar announced officially. 3 ships should be more than enough to assess their actual defensive capabilities. Once we confirm that these supposed dangers are just the fantasies of a primitive species, we can move forward with standard incorporation procedures. The other representatives nodded in agreement. They'd been through this process countless times before. A quick show of force, some negotiations with the local government, and another world would join the ever-expanding hegemony. The humans and their imaginary monster planet would soon learn what real power looked like. As the council session ended and the various species began returning to their ships, none of them noticed the small warning buried deep in Earth's geological survey. It mentioned something about a continent called Australia, described simply as having unique and diverse wildlife. To the aliens, it was just another boring scientific note. They had no idea they were about to discover that sometimes reality could be far more terrifying than imagination. The sleek alien landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere like a silver needle, its advanced cloaking systems making it invisible to human detection equipment. Scout Commander Rixeval watched the red desert landscape grow larger through his viewport, feeling confident about this routine mission. His species had conquered dozens of worlds, and Earth looked no different from any other primitive planet they'd encountered. Rixeval stood 7 feet tall, his gray skin covered by the most advanced environmental suit the hegemony had ever created. The suit could protect him from temperatures that would melt steel, radiation levels that would kill most life forms instantly, and toxic atmospheres that could dissolve metal. His team of 3 other scouts wore identical equipment, all of them veterans of hundreds of planetary surveys. This should be simple, he told his crew as they prepared for landing. The humans think their world is dangerous, but our scans show nothing more threatening than basic plant life and small animals. We'll collect samples, document their actual defensive capabilities, and be back on the ship in time for the evening meal. The craft touched down in what their computers had identified as the Australian outback, a vast empty region with almost no human settlements, perfect for their needs. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, covered in strange, reddish dirt and scattered with unusual plants that seemed to survive in the harsh desert conditions. Command, this is Scout Team Alpha. Rixeval reported to the fleet orbiting high above Earth. His voice transmitted perfectly through their quantum communication system. We have successfully landed in the target zone, beginning immediate surface reconnaissance of the area. Scout operator Zilneth, the team's biology specialist, was already taking readings with his advanced sensors. Initial scans show minimal human presence within a 50-kilometer radius, he reported. Standard carbon-based flora consistent with desert environments. Nothing unusual detected so far. The team moved out in formation, their suits automatically adjusting to Earth's gravity and atmospheric conditions. Everything seemed exactly as their databases had predicted. The temperature was hot but manageable. The air was breathable, though they kept their suits sealed as protocol demanded. And the landscape looked similar to dozens of other desert worlds they'd surveyed. Scout operator Nixhai, their weapons specialist, carried detection equipment that could identify threats from miles away. Motion sensors are picking up small movements consistent with insects and small reptiles, she reported. Nothing larger than what humans would call a rabbit. This matches our predictions exactly. For the first hour, everything went according to plan. They collected soil samples, documented the local plant life, and recorded atmospheric readings. Rixeval began composing his preliminary report in his head, already imagining how the council would react when he confirmed that Earth was indeed just another harmless garden world with an overactive imagination. That's when Zilneth noticed something moving near a cluster of rocks. Commander, he called out. There's something here that wasn't showing up on our sensors. He knelt down beside what appeared to be a small crevice between 2 stones. It's organic, about the size of my hand. Looks like some kind of arthropod. Rixeval approached cautiously, though he wasn't particularly concerned. Their suits could withstand the claws and teeth of creatures much larger than whatever was hiding in these rocks. What does the database say about it? Zilneth consulted his portable computer, scrolling through Earth's biological records. It's called a huntsman spider. According to human sources, it's considered relatively harmless to their species. Non-aggressive, rarely bites, and when it does, the venom isn't usually fatal to humans. See? Riksval said with satisfaction. Even their so-called dangerous creatures are practically harmless. Document it, and let's move on. But as Zilneth reached toward the spider to get a better scan, something went wrong. The creature moved faster than their sensors could track, faster than seemed physically possible for something of its size. In one fluid motion, it launched itself toward Zilneth's outstretched hand. The alien scout barely had time to register what was happening before he felt a sharp pressure against his glove. Impossible as it seemed, something had penetrated his environmental suit. The biosuit that could withstand acid rain and cosmic radiation had been breached by what appeared to be tiny organic needles. That's not possible, Zilneth muttered, staring at the small puncture marks in his supposedly impenetrable glove. Nothing organic should be able to. His words trailed off as warning lights began flashing inside his helmet. Within minutes, Zilneth's condition deteriorated rapidly. His cybernetic implants, designed to enhance his natural abilities and protect him from biological threats, began malfunctioning one by one. The spider's venom wasn't just affecting his organic tissues, it was somehow interfering with his artificial components as well. Command, Zilneth gasped into his communicator, his voice becoming weaker with each word. This wasn't in our biological assessments. The creature, it's not what we expected. His vital signs, transmitted live to the orbiting fleet, showed cascading system failures throughout his enhanced physiology. The other scouts watched in horror as their teammate collapsed, his body convulsing as both his natural nervous system and his cybernetic enhancements shut down simultaneously. The spider, meanwhile, had already disappeared back into the rocks as if nothing had happened. Riksval knelt beside his fallen comrade, checking readings that made no sense. How could something so small, something that humans considered relatively harmless, have bypassed every defense their advanced technology could provide? His suit's medical systems were detecting toxins unlike anything in their databases, compounds that seemed specifically designed to target the exact type of neural pathways that his species used. Command, we have a situation down here, he transmitted. To the fleet, his voice tight with concern. Scout Operator Zilneth is down. Repeat, we have a casualty from contact with local wildlife. The response from orbit came immediately. Impossible, Commander. Our scans show no life forms capable of threatening hegemony personnel. Riksval looked at the small crevice where the spider had disappeared, then at his dying teammate, then at the vast Australian landscape stretching endlessly around them. For the first time in his career as a scout, he began to wonder if they had made a serious mistake in their assessment of this world. The humans hadn't been exaggerating after all. If anything, they might have been understating the dangers that called Earth home. The panic in Riksval's voice echoed through the command center of the orbiting hegemony fleet. Officers who had been casually monitoring what they expected to be a routine planetary survey suddenly found themselves staring at screens showing vital signs that made no sense. One of their most experienced scouts was dead, killed by what their databases classified as a minor terrestrial arthropod. Fleet Command, we need immediate extraction, Riksval repeated, his transmission crackling with interference from Earth's magnetic field. The initial contact was not an anomaly. Repeat, this was not equipment failure or human trickery. These creatures are actually dangerous. Admiral Nexvara, a veteran of dozens of planetary conquests, floated in his command tank, with growing unease. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never heard such fear in a scout commander's voice. Explain your situation, Commander. How can primitive wildlife threaten hegemony personnel? Down on the surface, the remaining 3 scouts had moved away from the desert and were now exploring what their maps showed as a coastal region. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, its blue waters sparkling under the alien sun. It looked peaceful, almost inviting. Nothing like the harsh desert where their teammate had died. Dr. Kilmeth, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, watched the live video feed from her laboratory aboard the flagship. Her species resembled giant insects with compound eyes that could process multiple data streams simultaneously. She had studied thousands of alien ecosystems, and Earth's ocean life looked remarkably similar to dozens of other water worlds she had cataloged. "The coastal area appears safe," reported Scout Operator Yexhai, the team's geological specialist. "Water temperature is within acceptable ranges. No obvious predators visible. There are some tide pools here that might contain interesting specimens for study." Yexhai approached what looked like a small pond left behind by the retreating tide. The water was crystal clear, with colorful rocks and seaweed creating an almost decorative appearance. Small fish darted between the rocks, and various creatures clung to the surfaces below the water. "Command, I'm seeing what appears to be a small cephalopod," Yexhai reported, adjusting his suit's sensors for underwater scanning. "It's about the size of my fist, mostly brown in coloration. Appears docile and non-aggressive." Dr. Kilmeth consulted her databases, cross-referencing the visual data with Earth's marine biology records. "That appears to be what humans call a blue-ringed octopus," she transmitted to the surface team. "According to their scientific literature, it's a small marine creature. No immediate threat indicators in their basic classification." But as Yexhai leaned closer to get better readings, something extraordinary happened. The small brown creature suddenly began to change, its skin transforming into brilliant electric blue rings that pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The display was beautiful, unlike anything the aliens had ever seen on their sterile homeworlds. "Remarkable," Yexhai breathed, extending his gloved hand toward the water. "The color change appears to be some kind of communication or defensive display. I'm getting readings of complex biochemical processes occurring within the creature." Back on the ship, Dr. Kilmeth felt her mandibles clicking nervously as she accessed more detailed Earth databases. The basic classification had been correct, but the detailed biological information was still loading into her computers. What she was beginning to read made her blood run cold. The moment Yexhai's glove touched the water near the octopus, every alarm in his suit began screaming at once. The creature had moved so quickly that the suit's sensors couldn't track it, but somehow it had made contact with his protective equipment. Impossible warning messages flashed across his helmet display. "Unknown toxin detected. Barrier breach. Imminent. Critical system failure. It's dissolving our protective barriers," Yexhai gasped, stumbling backward from the tide pool. His voice carried a mixture of amazement and terror. "How is something this small? Command, it's breaking down the molecular structure of my suit." The live feed showed Yexhai falling to his knees as his environmental suit, designed to withstand the most extreme conditions in the galaxy, began to fail systematically. The blue-ringed octopus had somehow injected venom that didn't just attack biological systems, but actually broke down synthetic materials as well. "This is impossible," Dr. Kilmeth muttered, her claws dancing across multiple keyboards as she pulled up more detailed information. No natural organism should be capable of. The transmission from the surface cut to static. In her laboratory, Dr. Kilmeth stared at the data streaming across her screens with growing horror. The humans hadn't been lying or exaggerating about their wildlife. If anything, they had been understating the dangers. The detailed biological surveys she was now accessing showed that Australia, the continent where the scout team had landed, was actually considered one of the safer regions of Earth. The real nightmares, according to human scientific records, lived in places called the Amazon rainforest, where trees grew so densely that sunlight never reached the ground, and creatures existed that had no equivalent anywhere else in the galaxy. There were deep ocean trenches where the pressure would crush any known spacecraft, and things lived in permanent darkness that defied every principle of evolution the aliens understood. Most terrifying of all were references to what humans casually called prehistoric ecosystems preserved in isolation, places where creatures from Earth's ancient past still survived, animals so dangerous that even modern humans avoided them. "Command," Dr. Kilmeth transmitted to Admiral Nexvera, her voice vibrating with frequencies that indicated extreme distress in her species. "We may have made a critical error in our assessment. These humans, they don't just survive alongside these creatures. They've somehow learned to coexist with things that would wipe out entire civilizations. On the surface, Scout Commander Rixval and his remaining teammate found themselves alone in a world that had suddenly revealed itself to be far more dangerous than any battlefield they had ever known. And according to the databases they were now accessing, they had only encountered the beginning of what Earth had to offer. The worst part was realizing that somewhere on this planet, billions of humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that they were living in what the galaxy would soon classify as the most dangerous world ever discovered. Commander Rixval dragged himself across the red dirt, his advanced suit sparking and failing after 3 days of encounters with creatures that shouldn't exist. His team was gone, taken down one by animals so small that his sensors had dismissed them as harmless. The irony wasn't lost on him. A warrior trained to fight interstellar battles, defeated by things that could fit in his palm. His legs gave out near what looked like a small building made of metal and glass, sitting alone in the vast wilderness. Strange equipment dotted the area around it, and he could see lights glowing inside. A human settlement, he realized. Perhaps his final encounter on this nightmare world would at least be with something his size. The door opened before he could decide whether to call for help or prepare for battle. A young human female emerged, maybe in her 20s by their aging standards. She had dark hair pulled back and wore simple clothing that looked designed for working outdoors. What struck him most was her complete lack of fear when she saw his alien form collapsed on her doorstep. "Well, this is interesting," she said in accented English, kneeling down to examine his wounds. "You're in pretty bad shape. Let me guess, funnel web spider, box jelly, or did you run into one of our crocodiles?" Rixval's translator struggled with her rapid speech, but the meaning came through clearly enough. She wasn't surprised to see him. Somehow, impossibly, she had been expecting this. "I'm Dr. Minna," she continued, already pulling medical supplies from a bag she'd grabbed from inside. "Marine biologist stationed here to study tide pool ecosystems, and you're definitely not the first alien to underestimate what we've got living on this continent." She worked on his injuries with the skilled hands of someone who had clearly dealt with venomous bites before. Her equipment was primitive compared to hegemony medical technology, but she seemed to know exactly what she was doing. More importantly, she was treating him instead of running away or calling for military backup. "Not the first?" Rixval managed to ask, his voice weak but curious. Minna smiled as she cleaned a wound that one of Earth's smaller predators had somehow managed to inflict through his supposedly impenetrable armor. "We've been watching your people orbit our planet for weeks. Did you really think we didn't notice 3 massive spacecraft hanging around up there? We were wondering when you'd finally come down to visit." As she worked, Minna began explaining things that completely shattered everything Rixval thought he knew about how life was supposed to work on civilized worlds. Most planets that developed intelligent life, she told him, eventually reached a point where the dominant species eliminated or controlled all other dangerous creatures. It was the natural progression of civilization. But Earth never went through that phase, she continued, showing him images on a tablet computer. "We never got the chance to tame our world because life here has been engaged in what we call evolutionary arms races for billions of years. Every time one species develops a new way to kill, another species develops a new way to survive." The images she showed him made his remaining strength drain away completely. Creatures from something called the Amazon rainforest that could kill with the slightest touch. Deep-sea predators that looked like they had been designed by engineers, trying to create the perfect killing machine. Flying hunters that could spot prey from miles away and dive at speeds that would rival spacecraft. "This is actually the safer end of Australia," Minna said casually, scrolling through more footage. "You should see the box jellies during their season up north, or the saltwater crocodiles. Some of those big fellows can grow over 20 feet, long and have bite forces stronger than most industrial equipment." But what truly broke Rixval's understanding wasn't the existence of these creatures. It was what Minna told him about how humans interacted with them. "Australians regularly swim in waters where great white sharks hunt," she explained, showing him video of humans in the ocean with massive predators circling nearby. "We surf in areas where box jellyfish drift through the waves. Some people keep venomous snakes as pets, and there are actually folks who make their living catching crocodiles with nothing but rope and their bare hands. She showed him children playing in backyards where deadly spiders lived in the garden sheds. Families camping in areas where creatures roamed that could kill them in dozens of different ways. People who went about their daily lives completely surrounded by things that would terrify entire galactic civilizations. "Your species," Rixval whispered, his voice filled with something approaching awe, "didn't conquer your world through technology. You evolved alongside apex predators that would send our entire galactic civilization running in terror." Minna laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both friendly and slightly terrifying. "We didn't just evolve alongside them. We learned to coexist with them, respect them. Some of us even learned to love them. The thing is, when you grow up in a world where everything can kill you, you develop a very different perspective on what's actually dangerous." She gestured toward her research station, where he could now see monitoring equipment designed to track the movements of creatures in the nearby ocean. "I spend my days studying animals that could end my life in seconds, and I do it because they're beautiful and fascinating. That's what you aliens don't understand about us." "And Australia?" Rixval asked weakly. "Australia's honestly pretty tame compared to some places," Minna replied with a grin that made his blood run cold. "We just have better marketing when it comes to our dangerous wildlife. Wait until you hear about what lives in the deep parts of our oceans or the things that emerge from the Amazon during the rainy season." She helped him sit up straighter, and he realized that this young human woman had just accomplished something no alien species in the galaxy had ever managed. She had made a hegemony battle commander feel completely and utterly outmatched without firing a single shot. "We call it being Australian," she added cheerfully, as if casually surviving on a world full of evolutionary nightmares was the most natural thing in the universe. Admiral Nexavara floated in his command chamber aboard the flagship, staring at readings that made no sense. His tactical display showed something impossible happening in Earth's orbit. Dozens of defensive satellites were powering up around the planet, weapon systems that hadn't been there just hours before. The technology signatures were unlike anything in the hegemony databases, and some of the energy readings were actually higher than what his own fleet could produce. "How did they hide all of this?" demanded his chief tactical officer, her tentacles writhing with agitation. "Our sensors should have detected any advanced military installations." Before the admiral could respond, Commander Rixval's final transmission came through the quantum communication array. His voice was weak but clear, and what he reported sent shockwaves through the entire Fleet Command structure. "Fleet Command, humanity has been aware of our presence from the beginning," Rixval transmitted from the surface. "They allowed our inspection to proceed as a courtesy, not because they couldn't stop us. I repeat, they have been observing us this entire time." The Admiral's worst fears were confirmed when Earth's communication networks suddenly came alive, with signals directed at his fleet. Not threatening messages or demands for surrender, but polite diplomatic inquiries asking if the hegemony forces required any assistance with their visit. The humans were treating 3 massive warships as if they were tourists who had gotten lost. "Admiral," came a calm human voice through the communication system. "This is Earth Defense Command. We've noticed some of your personnel have encountered difficulties with our local wildlife. We have medical teams standing by if you need assistance." The casual tone of the message was somehow more terrifying than any battle cry. These humans were offering to help treat injuries caused by their own planet's creatures, as if alien soldiers being killed by spiders and jellyfish was just a minor inconvenience. Within hours, emergency sessions were being called across the galaxy. The news of what had happened to Scout Fleet Gamma spread through the hegemony's communication networks like wildfire. 3 of the most advanced military scouts in the galaxy had been defeated not by human weapons or technology, but by creatures so small that their sensors had dismissed them as irrelevant. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, with representatives arriving from across known space to address what was clearly an unprecedented situation. Admiral Nexavara found himself standing before hundreds of alien species, trying to explain how an entire scouting mission had been neutralized by what humans casually called wildlife. The initial classification was incorrect, he reported, to the assembled council. Earth is not a Category 1 nursery world. Based on what we've observed, it should be classified as something beyond our current rating system. The debate that followed lasted only minutes, but it changed the course of galactic history. Species after species stood up to share their own analysis of the data. The crystalline beings from the outer rim had run probability calculations that suggested any invasion of Earth would result in casualties that made conventional warfare look peaceful. The machine intelligences had analyzed Earth's biological databases and concluded that the planet contained more lethal species per square kilometer than any world they had encountered. "The humans don't just survive on this world," announced the representative from the ancient collective, whose species had been exploring space longer than anyone else in the galaxy. According to their own records, they consider many of these deadly creatures to be pets, entertainment, or even food sources. The final classification came down by unanimous vote. Earth was designated as a Category X death world with an immediate non-contact protocol. No hegemony vessels were to approach within 10 light-years of the system without explicit authorization from the highest levels of command. The fleet withdrawal began immediately, but the story was far from over. 6 months later, humanity's first diplomatic vessel arrived at the galactic capital. The ship itself was unremarkable by galactic standards, clearly built with recently acquired faster-than-light technology. What made it significant was what happened when it docked at the diplomatic station. Ambassador Park Jin-ho stepped out of the airlock wearing a simple black suit and carrying a briefcase that looked like it could have come from any business meeting on Earth. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a friendly smile, exactly the kind of person you might meet at a coffee shop or university lecture. The assembled alien representatives watched him approach the council chambers with fascination and barely concealed terror. This was their first close look at a member of the species that called the galaxy's most dangerous world home. That's when something small and dark fell from Jinho's sleeve onto the pristine floor of the diplomatic station. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. 3 different alien security guards collapsed in what appeared to be shock-induced unconsciousness. Others backed away so quickly that several collisions occurred among the crowd of representatives. Emergency protocols activated throughout the station as sensors detected an unknown biological entity. "Oh, that's just a huntsman spider," Jinho said calmly, watching the small creature scuttle across the floor with mild interest. His translator converted his words into dozens of different languages simultaneously. "Completely harmless. We find them in our ships all the time. Must have hitched a ride from Earth." The spider, which would have been utterly ordinary in any Australian household, caused more panic among the galactic community than most military invasions. Representatives from species that had conquered entire star systems fled from something that Earth children routinely removed from their bedrooms without a second thought. "Should I catch it?" Jinho asked helpfully, as if the creature wasn't causing a diplomatic incident of unprecedented proportions. The assembled representatives parted before the spider like it was carrying weapons of mass destruction. Several delegates had to be treated for what their medical systems classified as extreme stress responses. Within an hour of the spider incident, humanity received everything they had requested and more. Full council membership was approved unanimously, with no probationary periods or restrictions. Advanced trade agreements were signed immediately, giving Earth access to technologies that most species had to wait centuries to obtain. Cultural exchange programs were established, though notably they all involved humans visiting other worlds rather than aliens visiting Earth. Most importantly, humanity gained something no other species in galactic history had ever achieved: universal respect based purely on where they came from. Other civilizations had earned their reputations through military conquest, technological advancement, or economic power. Humans had earned theirs by simply surviving childhood on a world that treated everything else in the galaxy as a mild inconvenience. The final irony was that Earth's entry into the galactic community was the smoothest and most successful in recorded history. After all, no one wanted to argue with people who considered Australia's wildlife pretty tame compared to some places